Training camp is here. Today, Jordan will give you an overview of what to expect at camp, the top 5 battles to watch, and key dates. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Sounds Gouda. My name is Jordan Olson and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm excited as always to be talking Packers football with you all again, but a little extra excitement today as training camp begins this week. Right now we do have new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Buzzer, making a change to our schedule right now to accommodate a few people's work schedules and life. So for the time being, we will not have episodes on Thursday. Maybe we will bring those back to you again in the future. And as always, please make sure to subscribe. If you do subscribe, you get a chance to win a Sounds Gouda hat. We're going to raffle away one of those every 50 new subscribers until we get to 1,000 subs. Before I get to the training camp schedule, later in the show, I'm going to highlight the top 5 position battles to watch. As a teaser, I'm going to give you my first one right now. Also, stick around to the end of the show for one bold prediction related to the remainder of the offseason. So, key battle number 1 is for that cornerback number 2 spot, which essentially comes down to Carrington Valentine versus Benjamin St-Juste. Nixon right now seems to have one of those spots locked up. That's kind of what I'm hearing from reporting. However, I would not write his name in there in ink, but it's safe to assume that he has one of those spots locked down right now. So what would you get in Carrington Valentine versus Benjamin St-Juste? I think a lot of fans were frustrated with what they saw from Carrington Valentine last year. A few blown coverages, a couple of games where he missed some key tackles. Obviously, he needs to make a big improvement in his ability to tackle, wrap people up, and end plays. I think that would go a long way for him in demonstrating that this camp and preseason. However, there's only going to be so many opportunities for him to prove that with the limited game action, especially going against your own teammates, right? So he did have a 65.7 overall PFF grade last year, which was 44th amongst qualified cornerbacks. It's not terrible. I mean, that is basically an upper 50% of the league rating. So could be a lot worse for a starter. At a coverage grade of 66.4, which also ranked 44th amongst 114 qualified cornerbacks. Run defense grade 59.3. So that was 59th at the position. Kind of already talked about that. And then also, this has been a struggle for Valentine in general, but 0 interceptions last season. He has not proven when that ball's gotten near him to have any kind of ball hawking mentality. Gets a few PBUs, but never ends up coming away with the ball. That could definitely be an area where he could improve and make huge strides towards taking that starting job and towards staying in the lineup. So Benjamin St-Juste, obviously the newcomer, he's a free agent coming over from the Los Angeles Chargers, and he had a really good season last year. I've talked about this on the show before. I thought that this was a big steal of an ad for about $5 million. He's on a 2-year deal, but 75.6 overall PFF grade, 12th amongst 114 qualified cornerbacks. So, their snap counts weren't exactly identical, but you can see from what PFF saw in his sample size, we may get much better results out of Benjamin St-Juste. Coverage grade 77.1. That was 9th amongst 114 qualified cornerbacks, and a run defense grade of 66.8. So noticeable improvement in all categories over Valentine. And he also actually did come away with 1 interception last season. So I would say early on, Benjamin St-Juste certainly has an advantage, but Carrington Valentine is the incumbent, and it's kind of going to be his job to lose at this point in time. Either way, I think you'll end up with one of those guys improving that position. And then you really got Brandon Cisse as a developmental backup, somebody who actually, we have a lot of stock in moving forward. But it's going to be Valentine or St-Juste, in my opinion, that win that starting job. All right. We will get to the other 4 key battles later in this video. But first, let's talk about the training camp schedule. So some key dates that you're going to want to tune into. So today, rookies and injured players report. That is Monday, July 27th. Tomorrow, July 28th, the veteran players will report. On Wednesday, July 29th will be the first practice. So we're actually going to start getting reports and actually hear what's going on with these players at practice. Outstanding guys like Andy Herman are going to be around covering camp all throughout, and I'll be really looking forward to getting those updates leading up to the first action that a lot of us can see on family night in these preseason games. Family night is scheduled for Friday, August 7th. I've been to a few family nights, mostly when I was younger, but since I moved out of the state, haven't had an opportunity to go to one. I've got a couple of young kids at home. Certainly look forward to making the journey over to Green Bay and taking my young children to family night in a couple of years here. But if you have not been to one, it's an outstanding experience, and I would recommend going, especially if you have children at home. So August 13th is going to be the first preseason game in Pittsburgh against the Steelers. And it'll be interesting to see what Matt LaFleur's approach is this year, if he's going to play his starters heavily in week one and then kind of taper off as the preseason goes along, if he'll kind of ramp people up with more playing time in game two. We will see that game two is Friday, August 21st in Denver against the Broncos. I kind of anticipate that may be the game where we see the most action from starters, but Matt LaFleur seems to make adjustments every year to his training camp schedule. So we'll see what happens in that game. Moving into the following week, we have the joint practice with Arizona in Green Bay on August 26th. For all intents and purposes, that practice will mean much more than that preseason game on August 28th. They send those players head to head, have them compete pretty heavily. And that last preseason game, which is the only one at Lambeau, will probably be a mixture of players playing for the last few spots on this 53 and sorting out the practice squad. So roster deadline day to reach the final 53 for active and inactive players is on Sunday, August 30th. And then waiver claims will be due on Monday, August 31st. And at that point in time, your team is going to be set, bearing any trades or any other moves that you're able to do. A couple of weeks of practice will lead us up to week one, Sunday, September 13th. There's an afternoon game in Minnesota, so definitely looking forward to that. And that's really what the next 6 weeks look like. It'll go by really fast, but it'll be really fun to get all these reports and start to figure out what this roster is going to look like this season. All right, so getting back to the top 5 battles to watch, and again, stick around to the end of the episode to hear my bold prediction for camp, or one bold prediction. I'll probably sprinkle them in throughout these training camp episodes, but I'm going to give you one today. So after our first battle that I highlighted, which was for cornerback 2, my next one is going to be for interior offensive line starters, essentially Sean Rhyan, Anthony Belton, and Jagger Burton, I think, that are the 3 that will compete for starting positions. Sean Rhyan seems to be set to be the opening day starter at center, and Anthony Belton is the incumbent at right guard. So those are the 2 guys that should have a hold of those positions going into camp. However, if Jagger Burton can really show that he can displace one of those players, for example, maybe he shows that he is a very competent starting center, and maybe the Packers feel that Sean Rhyan is an upgrade over Anthony Belton at right guard. Maybe you see that work out. Maybe Sean Rhyan seems like, he's been working with Jordan Love and they feel really good about that battery between him at center and Jordan Love at quarterback. Maybe Jagger Burton just flat out outplays Anthony Belton. We know Anthony Belton is converting from a career tackle to play on the interior. Some guys can handle that move, others cannot. So maybe that transition will go well. He's certainly going to have a ton of time to cross-train at right guard this camp. But if Jagger Burton just comes out and proves that he is the better option at right guard, and he played plenty of guard and center for Kentucky, maybe Jagger Burton can steal that job from Anthony Belton. And then you go back to cross-training Anthony Belton to be one of your tackle options, and then your depth at tackle is a whole lot better. Darian Kinnard being the first off the bench and then having a really, really good depth and insurance plan, with Anthony Belton being next after that. So a couple things to look at here. Sean Ryan did get, I think, 8 starts last year at the center position. He had a 58.5 overall PFF grade, just a little south of being a league average starter, but 31st amongst 40 qualified centers in the 808 snaps that he played. So hopefully as he gets more time to settle into that position and entire offseason, he can improve his play there at center. Clearly, they believe he's competent and confident in him because they gave him that extension to come back and hopefully take that job. He did allow 28 total pressures in pass protection that included 1 sack and 8 QB hits. That's certainly a place where he has an opportunity to improve, including 5 penalties that he accrued over the course of last season. So while I do believe that Sean Ryan can play better at center as he settles into that, certainly some left to be desired there. Anthony Belton, he's definitely figuring it out at right guard. Mentioned he's converting from basically a career tackle over there. Had a great career at NC State as a tackle, but he only had a 49.7 overall PFF grade last year, which was 72nd among 81st qualified guards. He allowed 23 pressures, 0 sacks, and 2 hits. So when he was on the field, which was about half the time of Sean Ryan, he fared a little bit better, but a lot of pressures indicate that he probably needs to work better in tandem with his teammates and probably have a little quicker first step. He does bring some upside in run blocking, but he also, according to PFF, had a lot to be desired there. So he's got a lot of work and development to do to lock down and earn that position. And then Jager Burton is all projection. He is a 5th-round selection from Kentucky. Last year in college, he did allow 0 sacks and 0 hits to opposing pass rushers, and he was only flagged twice over the course of the season. So there is a lot of hope that him playing against that high level of competition in the SEC could translate to the NFL level. He is going to be a rookie playing against a whole slew of bigger, faster guys, though. So we will see if he can step up, take one of those positions, or at least we will feel really confident about him being the number 1 off the bench on the interior. So the next camp battle will be the week 1 starter for edge opposite of LVN. So it really comes down to 3 guys: Barron Sorrell, Brenton Cox Jr., and denied Dennis Sutton, or DDS, as the 3 players who I think have a real opportunity to do that. Of course, Barron Sorrell is a 2nd-year player, 4th-round pick out of Texas. Really flashed in a couple of games that he played in last year, so didn't generate enough snaps to rank anywhere amongst any edge rushers as a rookie, but he did generate 6 pressures, 2 sacks, 3 hurries, 1 hit, and against the run, he recorded 9 solo tackles. So I think he's a lot of people's favorite, or the person in the pole position right now, thinking that they could take those snaps and become the starter week 1 opposite of LVN, but we will see. I think the other guy really vying for that position, truthfully, Brenton Cox Jr., really liked his upside when he's been on the field. He hasn't consistently gotten snaps over the last 2 years, but when he does get an opportunity on the field, he is definitely a plus pass rusher. So last year he had a pass rush grade of 67.2. I believe the previous year that was somewhere in the mid-70s. So give Brenton Cox opportunities, and he can definitely bring you upside as a pass rusher. Last year, he had the 5 pressures, 1 sack, 2 hurries, and 2 hits. He also forced a fumble. Super high athlete guy out of Florida a few years ago. If Brenton Cox wins that starting job week 1 with being more of a vet, would not surprise me. And then DDS, I'm going to throw him in there. I think he has the opportunity to come in and impress. My guess is that he will be a rookie and do rookie-like things, meaning they'll want to trust one of those veterans a little bit more. But I was really high on DDS coming into the draft. I've been on record saying that I would have even drafted him in the right circumstances early as the 2nd round. And if I would have drafted him there, that means that I believe that he could have had day 1 impact as a potential starter. So it would not surprise me if he had the skill set to flash and earn that spot. Most likely it will be the mental aspect of his game and not the physical aspect of his game that will hold him back from that spot. Still expect him to get plenty of opportunities to rotate in that pass rush this coming season. These next two probably won't spend quite as much time on just because there's a lot less to kind of work through, but I will give you some thoughts on these last two battles I'm going to be watching. So wide receiver 6, really Bo Melton versus J. Michael Strudevant and Isaiah Nair. So Melton probably has the inside track. He's making his return to full-time wide receiver. His best year as a wide receiver was a few years ago, his rookie season as a Packer, 16 receptions, 218 yards, and 1 touchdown. So he had a long of 37 yards. Bo Melton's been used pretty sparingly. You would have expected those numbers to kind of increase and his role increase. His role has actually decreased over the last 2 years. Part of that was they tried to make him a cornerback last year. So 91 yards on 8 receptions in 24, 107 yards on 4 receptions in 25. They love Bo Melton, the individual. He's a key special teams player. And for those two things, he kind of has the inside track. However, where he has a disadvantage is if Sky Moore makes this team as a returner and Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden are both smaller bodied guys, that really only leaves you with Christian Watson as a bigger body wide receiver. And I think that that's something that Matt LaFleur is going to desire. So if you look at J. Michael Strudevant and Isaiah Nair, they're very identical players from a physical standpoint. Both 6'4", Strudevant's 218, Nair's 220. Both run 40 times in the low 4.4s, and both were some of the best and highest scoring RAS candidates coming into the draft each of the last 2 seasons. Strudevant with his 9.96 RAS ranks 17th all time since they started collecting RAS scores in 1987. And Isaiah Nair had the 11th best score all time since collecting scores from 1987 with a 9.97 RAS out of a possible 10. So Nair did get activated last year in that Bears game and played a couple snaps, but basically both of those guys have potential intrigue as that bigger body guy, somebody who could come in who would be required to be a blocker, who would be a bigger guy that would stretch the field, maybe somebody that serves in that MVS role from a couple years ago. Both of them had pretty high yards per reception. So not volume guys, but guys that can stretch the field, be a big body that can go out on the boundary or stretch the seam and hopefully come down with a big catch. So, Strudevant was given a pretty good contract to come in as an unrestricted free agent this year. And if you're unfamiliar with Isaiah Nair, he's a second-year player from Nebraska. He originally signed as a UDFA with the 49ers. And after he was released, the Packers picked him up and had him on the practice squad most of last season. All right, last camp battle to watch. I'm not going to really dive into the kicking one if you want to talk about kicking competition. I think the Packers have invested pretty heavily into Trey Smack, and it would take a lot for them to really retract from that decision and cut him because somebody would pick up Trey Smack immediately. So I think that Trey Smack is going to have to play really, really bad to lose that, and it's not going to be a real competition. But my last competition to watch is for tight end 2. Basically, Luke Musgrave versus Josh Whyle versus Luke Lachey. Musgrave, this should be his job to take, but he's on the hot seat. He's injury prone. He's got poor yak, and the guy cannot block. So there are at least 3 reasons right there alone why Josh Whyle or Luke Lachey could take that job. If they can both prove that they are more well-rounded and competent blockers and receivers, they could make Luke Musgrave expendable. They might even trade him. They might just decide that Luke Musgrave is not developed enough to have him earn that number 2 spot. Maybe not even be on the roster. So obviously Josh Whyle, same draft class as Musgrave and Kraft, another super high RAS guy, somebody who I think brings you a little bit more overall, but somebody who is going to have to earn some snaps. I think at the end of last season, Josh Whyle took over as tight end 2, kind of surpassing Musgrave. We will see. And then Luke Lachey, they obviously picked him up this year. He was a 2025 draft pick. 7th rounder that played in Houston all of last season after Houston cut him Packers picked him up this offseason, but at 6'6", 247 pounds, and being at least an average blocker in college, both in the pass and run game, I think that gives you the opportunity to develop him as a more well-rounded inline tight end. They're going to still be searching for somebody who might be their wide tight end. Maybe Musgrave serves in that role for this year, but we will also see, and it depends on if Tucker Kraft is ready week 1. That can determine the whole pecking order here. All right. If you stuck around this long, it is time for my bold prediction of this episode. So listening to some other podcasters, I was recently traveling, a couple shows talking about camp and some bold predictions. I believe that this is a fresh and unique take of my own. One of the shows had a prompt about, would there be any trades for Goody this offseason? What would those look like? I'm going to predict that if Goody trades for a player, that it will be for an offensive lineman. It won't be for a Josh Sweat. It won't be for another player of need. I mean, the one shortfall of that is if some more information comes out about Josh Jacobs and he's going to go to jail. We might need to trade for a running back out of necessity. But I think that if Goody evaluates this offensive line and these prospects throughout this training camp and determines that there's not a real seventh guy, whether it's a backup tackle or an interior player after Darian Kennard, and he's not confident in the depth of that unit, if he goes out and makes a trade, it will be to bolster the depth along the offensive line. So there you go. There's my bold prediction for this episode. That's all I got for you folks. More great Packers content from Sounds Good every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Thanks for listening. Please make sure to share this with your family, friends, and other Packers fans. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, comment, let us know what you think. It helps us out a ton. So connect with me on X at Olson Jord, Rob's at Sounds Gouda with 3 A's, and Kalani's at KJonesIN_CO. Until next time, Packers Nation, have a Gouda morning, a Gouda afternoon, and a Gouda night. Go Pack Go, and enjoy training camp.